Well, welcome to part four and the final part of our series on building this Louisiana Territory log cabin. We're all set now to seal our logs and apply our daubing in between them. We're going to apply this Mod Podge matte sealer to our logs. This will give us a finish that will allow us to wipe off the excessive daubing more easier when we apply it. To make our daubing, we're going to combine buttermilk paint with this light molding paste by Golden. I put some of the molding paste in this empty bottle, and now I'm adding the buttermilk paint. There is no mixing formula to use, as the white molding paste will just take on the color of the paint it is being mixed with. And there you have it. We're all set to go. I apply the daubing with a brush, as I yet haven't found a way to do it quicker. It's a very time-consuming process, but I found this to be the best way. I then, after I apply it in between the logs, I take a flat stick and run it along the logs to wipe off the excess of daubing. Then after that, I use a concave sculpturing tool to put kind of a nice groove along the logs. Then I take a damp cloth and wipe off the excess from the logs carefully with my fingers in the cloth. And then, of course, I use a dry cloth to rub off any excess that's still on the logs. Good time to discuss the difference between daubing and chinking. Chinking is the process of first filling in the gaps between the logs that the pioneers used, by using various items such as straw, small pieces of wood, small stones, a mixture of clay, mud, or whatever else was available. And after they applied the chinking to fill in between these gaps, then they applied the daubing to seal the outer surface. And of course, since we're building a model here, we have no need to do the chinking because it's not going to be seen. Well, okay, I've got this side done. It took me about 45 minutes. I'll go ahead and off camera do the other three sides while we move on with the project. With the daubing finished, let's go ahead and make our plank door. Next, we'll go ahead and cut the grooves for the planks into our plastic piece that we've cut out. They can be of various widths because nothing was exactly measured in the pioneer times. They were just random wood that was made to fit the width of the door. We'll make the cross planks from these evergreen styrene strips, 0.030 by 0.156 inches. Well, we apply a coat of Kilt's primer to the door. This is a good time to answer questions that some of you may have as to why we're using styrene instead of regular wood to make this cabin door. Well, I've adopted this method from the late model railroader Harold Minkwitz. I saw an article of his a number of years ago, and I've got a link up here on the video. And Harold maintained that after years of experience with trying to achieve the weathered look of wood in model railroading, that styrene, it was actually better to work with in getting that appearance that he wanted of the aged wood than actual wood itself. So the technique, after applying a prime coat to your styrene, is to apply a number of light coats of your paint, wiping them off in between coats. And in my case, I'm even diluting this brown oxide paint with water. And there you have the finished product, after I've also applied a black antique glaze to the finished door. Well, on to the roof. I recommend you use a 0.30 thick styrene by Plastistruck for the two roof pieces. I also recommend, as I've done here, that you cut out a template out of cardstock. You'll notice, this is because of the chimney openings, and you'll notice that I've allowed 1/8 of an inch overhang on each side. Okay, two pieces are cut out now, and I'm going to take them outside and use this Rust-Oleum gray primer and put a primer coat on them, top and bottom. Well, okay, we're finished priming them. We're actually going to leave this gray color on the bottom, since it'll look natural as you look up at the 1/8 inch overhang of the peak. For the shingles, we're going to use this rail scale models, O-scale cut and random cut shake shingles. You also need to get what's called the straight cut shingles that are strips and also used for the roof caps. Like doing a regular roof job on a house, we'll start with one of the starter strips. By the way, these shingles have an adhesive backing, which makes it very easy to glue on. I find these shingles made by Rail Scale, that's R-A-I-L by the way, are among the best on the market. They're made from a heavy wood content paper, and they're perfect for scale, and they give you that good appearance of wood. So I'll go ahead and speed this up, as after we apply the starter strip, we'll go ahead and apply the shingles one row at a time. Well, there you have it. If you notice, as I applied each row, I overhanged the preceding row with the current row so that the shingles would be alternated like a real roof job. Also, I allowed an overhang on each side, and then they were easy for me to trim up with the scissors, or you can even use a sharp knife. You can see the roof peak strip here. And what we're going to do now to start the coloring and weathering process is to use this Rust-Oleum satin dark brown paint. The next step in the process is to apply this Velspar lime wash glaze to the roof shingles to bring out the definition. The technique is to do one small section at a time, about 1.5 inches wide, and then immediately wipe it off with a dry cloth, making sure that you get the lime wash in all the crevices between the shingles. With that done, we next want to dry brush some of this apple barrel plain white paint to simulate streaks running across the roof, as they could occur in nature, especially if the cabin is sitting under some trees. As with any dry brushing, the technique is to put as little paint as possible on with a clean dry brush. And then, of course, you can always wipe excess of paint off with a dry cloth as you do it. And we're going to put it on in a pattern of, 6 or 7 streaks across the roof, front and back. Next, we're going to mix 6 parts water and 1 part burnt sienna in order to make a wash that we're going to very liberally apply to the roof to give it a more reddish cedar shake look. Well, now with the wash dry, the next step in our process is to apply one more coat of the lime wash antique glaze. This will not only tone down the red a little bit, but also it will bring out that definition in between the shingles. Well, there you have it, a weathered log cabin roof. This will certainly pass muster. Well, okay, it's time to mount our roof. I had previously added some roof braces onto the inside of our cabin structure. And also at the same time, we'll add these mounting braces to the bottom of the structure. Well, there you go. We certainly have a log cabin roof worthy of a blue ribbon at the county fair. Okay, it's time to glue on our door. And for that, I'm going to use super glue. And I'm going to take an unfolded paper clip to apply that and carefully glue the door in, trying not to have any overflow of glue on the outside frame. This is how I made the simulated clay tiles for the top of the chimney. I cut and rolled out, a small square piece of paper clay, the same size as the chimney top. And then I carved 4 lines into it to simulate the tiles. I also poked a 3/16 inch diameter hole right in the center to hold the flue pipe. The flue pipe, I cut off a 3/4 inch piece of this K&S precision aluminum tubing. I then painted it with this wrought iron black paint and glued it in after the paint dried. While the paint was drying on the flue pipe, I went ahead and applied a couple of coats of antique black glaze by Velspar, wiping it off immediately to give it that weathered and used look. And here's the finished product. Next, we'll go ahead and build our stoop. Frequently, the pioneers used the same logs that they made for the cabin to make a stoop for their entrance. And we'll do the same. We'll use the same 1/4 inch by 3/8 inch basswood, stained and weathered, of course. And what we'll need is 6 pieces, 1 1/4 inch long. And then we'll go ahead and glue them together using a simple pattern of 3 on the bottom row, 2 on the second row, and 1 on the top row. And there you have it, a simple yet a very usable log cabin stoop. Well, the log cabin is finished now, and what I like to do with the miniatures that I build is to mount them on a display stand. I think it's an appropriate way to display your miniatures, and also gives me an opportunity to sign and date my work. And I do think that all craftspeople should be proud of their work and sign it, title it, and give it a date when you finished it. You were just looking at a stone house that I did, and here's another English country cottage that I did, and you'll see again I like to use a curved shape, and I leave room on the back to date it. I also put cushions on the bottom so it can be placed on a mantle or a bookcase without scratching it. I like to make my own display stands, and I use a piece of inexpensive clipboard that's made out of a fiberboard, and I think it's very appropriate to scale. And I know I said at the beginning of the video that no fancy power tools are needed, and this is the one exception. I do use a jigsaw to cut out the stand for the house. But if you're not comfortable with that or don't have a jigsaw, there are plenty of suitable display stands available in stores like Michael's, Hobby Lobby, or even online. So what I use is this flexible ruler to lay out the shape that I'm looking for that'll not only handle the structure itself, but as I mentioned, give me room in the back to sign and date it and title the piece of work. As you can see, the flexible ruler gives you the opportunity to shape and reshape your design until you get exactly what feels and fits comfortably for your display. Well, okay, I've cut out the basic stand from the piece of fiberboard, and as you can see, it fits the house perfect. And next, what we're going to do is give it a prime coat of Krylon white primer paint. Okay, our primer white is dry now, and what we're going to do is sand it with this 220 grit fine sandpaper lightly. Then what I've done is I've picked out a contrasting color to the cabin, this English Ivy green by Apple Barrel, which I think will display the cabin nicely. Let's go ahead and give it a first coat. Well, okay, our first coat is done and dry. So again, we'll sand it with this 220 grit fine sandpaper, and then we'll go ahead and give it a second coat. Well, it looks like 2 coats will do it. Before we permanently mount the log cabin to the stand, I want to go ahead and sign it. So for that, I recommend using a black Sharpie, the ultra fine point. And what I like to do is first lay out on a piece of paper the message, you know, the date and the time, my signature, etc., that I'm going to put down there, and just make sure it fits in the space that I've allocated to it. I can still shift the house a little bit if I need to. Here's what my finished signature looks like. So even though I've used a permanent marker, in the next step, what I want to do is spray the whole stand covering the signature with this matte clear by Rust-Oleum, just to seal everything in. Here's how nice that matte finish looks. And as kind of the next to last step is we want to glue on these pads so that we'll be able to display this miniature on any surface, whether it's a mantle, bookcase, or a fine coffee table, etc. Okay, it's time to glue both the house and the stoop onto our display stand. For that, we'll use these gluing braces that we had put on earlier on the bottom of the house. That'll give us some leeway room to move the house around to position it exactly without any external glue showing on the sides of the house. For this, I recommend using both wood glue and super glue to make sure we have a permanent adhesion to the stand. And there you have it, the Louisiana Territory log cabin, circa 1825. I dare say, if not a museum quality miniature, it certainly will make a nice addition to anyone's mantle, bookcase, model railroad layout, or miniature collection. Well, if you found this project useful and informative, please give it a thumbs up below and also subscribe. That way you will be informed of my new projects. Below I have added time codes and major section headings so that you can access specific parts of the project easily. This has been a complete craft project, from the chimney top right down to the display stand that it sits on. And by necessity, I've divided it into 4 video parts according to the sequence that I actually built it in. So if you are going to build this log cabin for yourself, I certainly recommend that you view the other 3 videos. Don't forget to get a free copy of the house plan drawings below, plus a list of supplies and materials that I used on this project. In case you can't get some of these items locally, I've also furnished links for you to obtain them. Lastly, I invite you to visit my Etsy shop where you can see some of my other creations. See the link below. Good luck with your own build, and if you have any questions that I can help with, please ask them in the comments section below.